noticed a lot of companies who they've like outsourced once in the past, usually to India, and they make a new rule that will never outsource anything ever again. To no matter what, company, to no matter what country.
Yeah.
After one experience with outsourcing to India. How do you sell to these kinds of companies? You're not really, the companies really seek out you, or do you try to still sell to these types of companies that have this one bad experience? Yeah.
When I do that, I go in and I tell them, we want to, we understand. We've all had bad experiences doing this. But we will take that risk.
So you take the risk.
We will take the risk. We will do, let's go on a blind date. Let's get a project going. And we're not going to charge you. You give us a project, maybe a month, maybe 2 or 3 people. We'll do it. We'll do it for free. And then we'll say, was that a different date than the ones you've had in the past? And if it isn't, then fine. Here, take the work. Belongs to you. The code belongs to you. The output belongs to you. We hope that you find it valuable, but just take it, and we'll So that's how we run. Okay, are we starting? Sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Thank you for welcoming me. I'll introduce myself in a second. We talked a little bit about my company, In Time Tech. Creating abundance. Back of my business card says, we create abundance. We just happen to do software. So the way to think about this, the way I got it, the way I internalize it is, instead of getting a bigger piece of the pie, we want to grow everybody's pie. Everybody wins. That's what creating abundance means to me. This talk, the art of project management, maybe it should be arts, plural. There are multiple arts. And why is it the art of project management? Art is in the eye of the beholder. It's subjective. There are processes, there are tools there, and if you run into something called a PMP, Certified Project Manager, they will tell you, PMP certification tells you you do project management like this, but there's a lot of stuff in between. And that's what I'm here to share with you. It's very interactive. The content of this I put together over the course of a year, and I just started piling stuff in as it came to my mind as I was sharing it with other people. And it was over 100 slides. I counted it down to about 15 today. I shared a lot of this content with my daughter's company. She owns a stop motion animation studio down in Burbank, California, and I shared it with her, and they were just like, we knew how to do certain things in the film industry that matches up, but there's a bunch of other stuff, and yeah, we can read in between the lines, and you gave us a whole lot of different ways to view what we're doing. And so anyway, let's get on with it. My name is Mike Kwan. I am PMP certified, and I'm Vice President of the Pacific Northwest for In Time Tech. Prior to this, I was release manager at Autodesk. Autodesk has a big office right across the river on the south side of the Burnside Bridge in the old town storage building. What is a release manager? It's like a super project manager, but it has to do with kind of when a product gets made and gets deployed, whether to the cloud or whether you're making, oh my gosh, DVDs. I hate to say that, but how do you smooth that? And it isn't just integrating with Cloud Ops. It isn't just deploying, but it's how do you affect the upstream development processes in order to smooth the transition to getting it into the hands of your customers. That's what a release manager does. Before that, project manager, program manager, engineering manager, whatever you want to call it at Hewlett-Packard. I was there for 26 years. Yeah, that was really a school of hard knocks at HP, learning quite a bit about how just to get stuff done. And I put this, head coach, PDX Volleyball Club. When I look back, in fact, I just archived, we finished our club season a couple of weeks ago, and I was archiving my stuff and putting it all away, and it occurred to me how much project management I use, how much I look at the season, how much I look at the next tournament, how do I build skills, how do I detect which players need what skills in order to build to our goals for the next tournament, how does the next tournament after that build, how are we peaking at regionals. This is all the subject of project management. And if you notice, Enzyme Tech and USA Volleyball, yes, on my Mac. And I didn't plan on coming here and just speaking to you for 30 minutes. I want to speak with you. This is interactive. Ask me anything you want. If it takes a little bit long and we're getting pigeonholed, I'll put it on the board for a parking lot. And I'm here. I don't have anything to do until 3 o'clock when I need to be over at Autodesk to talk to them. Yes?
What does PMP stand for?
PMP, Project Management Professional. PMP was when somebody put project manager on their resume, nobody knew what that meant. So the Project Management Institute was started and defined if you get a PMP certification, this person has studied and been certified and tested out in a certain level of skills and knowledge in project management.
Would you say that's worthwhile, career-wise, and also the actual curriculum is also worthwhile to know when you work as a project manager?
That's funny. I just had this conversation this morning over coffee. Is it worthwhile? When you're searching for a job as a project management, yes. It is. For certain companies, it is a barrier to entry. It is one of those filters that they'll put on the job application site. After being a project manager within HP for 10 years and then getting a PMP certification, no, you kind of say, well, I was pretty good at HP and I didn't do half of the stuff that was on the exam.
Yeah.
But then after being at Autodesk for 3 or 4 years, it started occurring to me, I'll go back and I'll look at all the PMP stuff. Oh yeah, here's some stuff that that we're not doing, but it may be useful now because we're running into problems here on this project. So I ended up at Autodesk having a concise form of the curriculum in PMP and going through a checklist every time I started a new project. I like that. We're not doing that, and I don't think we need to. Wow, I like this one, and it fills a hole that we've always struggled with. So, good reference.
I would add one caveat. Part of the PMP is having the experience and
Oh, yeah,
certification.
Yes. Oh yeah. You don't get PMP without you got to log certain many of hours in different areas. So the outline for this course, we'll talk about some foundational concepts of project management that transcend all the different varieties and everything in between. And remember, this is my Kwan's personal opinion on this. And I'm going to tell you stuff, and the guy the person next to you who's also PMP will say, Mike's full of it. That's just his opinion. Well, I'm here to give you my school of hard knocks. I'll talk about the art of selective neglect. When you become a project manager, there's so much stuff to do and not enough hours in the day. And you'll be tempted to spend more hours in the day, and then you're going to run out of brain cells and hours. And so you got to figure out what to neglect. And what I neglect isn't the same as what the next person will neglect. I'll give you a little overview of what WATERFALL. This is the art of trying to be predictable. I think I should have put that in there. Trying to be predictable. It's not always predictable because life's not always predictable. I'll touch on Agile, the art of learning. This gets lost when you talk about Agile processes. The original intent of Agile processes was to iterate to learn. To iterate to learn. And I'll go back and talk about some of that. And by the way, it's not like I'm going to teach you how to be a Scrum Master in this talk. I'm just going to, again, it's kind of Mike Kwan's school of hard knocks. And then I'll talk about SCRUMMERFALL, the art of being agile in the real world, because the real world is waterfall most of the time. Yeah, if you're turning on a website for Mom's Knitting Club, that can be purely Scrum. But if you're talking about even turning out a cloud-based CAD application like I did at Autodesk, yeah, we ran Agile, we ran Scrum. The development teams were pretty hardcore Scrum, but there were marketing introduction deadlines, there were deadlines for learning products, there were deadlines, there were Japanese pop-ups, you know, during an opening of a mall, and we absolutely needed to hit that with Japanese language localization, and we couldn't change it. The outside world is oftentimes waterfall. So let's get into it. Foundational concepts. Before I get going, any quick questions? Let's dive in. Balancing the variables of project management. This is one of the foundational concepts. You'll hear it quite often. Yeah. Scope, schedule, and resources. Normally I put people here. Especially in programming, you talk about people. Sometimes you talk about resources because you got to talk about machinery and things like that. So it's all a balance. Scope, what are you building? Schedule, when do you need it built? Resources, how many people do you have? How many machines do you have? You know, can you spend more? You know, can you have more scope if you gave me more schedule? Yeah, probably. You know, can you tighten the schedule? Well, maybe if you give me more people or reduce the scope. These are the types of conversations that happen. So this is very, very common. Scope, schedule, resources. You'll hear this over and over again. But in the School of Hard Knocks, there are two more. Quality and risk. Yeah, I can ship that sooner. I'm going to cut out the QA, though. You know, some of the QA time. Can you tolerate that? If you're launching a space shuttle, probably not. If you're launching Mom's Knitting website, you probably can. And risk. How risky do you want to be? If you got zero risk tolerance, it's going to take longer. Okay? So scope, schedule, resources, people will gravitate toward that naturally in the back of your head. You're dealing with quality and risk also. Yeah? Somebody?
How do you separate quality from scope?
Quality from scope. So scope typically is driven by a market need or an end user need. Can you separate quality? Yeah, I can give you all the scope that you want, but only be 50% confident or test 50% of the code or 50% of the functionality. They're not all independent, and this is why they all need to be balanced together. You can't move one without affecting the others. Okay. Do I have another foundational concept? Yes. The priority matrix. Your partners, your not everybody uses this, but they should. So priority matrix, it's a game you play with all your sponsors, especially. So the people who are going to pay you, the managers who are above you. If you're in development, your marketing people. You play this game, you lay out your 5 variables, scope, schedule, resources, quality, risk, and you put 5 columns and you say, only put one X in any column, and they won't want to do it. They'll say, well, I want scope, schedule, and constrain your resources, and those are all going to be fixed. And you say, no, that's not the game. Put 1 in each, and they'll hate doing it. But you do that up front, and then you have hard discussions. You have hard discussions early in the project instead of late in the project. Yes? Somewhere between fix and optimize. I didn't have a name for it. Anybody else? They'll get the picture. So scheduling, I'm not going to tell you how to do scheduling in its entirety. But basically, I mean, it depends on the project. It could be just a list of dates. But basically, you'll have a conversation, even if it's just in your head. What are we building? We're building X. What do we have to do to build X? Well, you got to do A, B, and C. Well, when you do A, what do you have to do to do A? Well, that actually you'd have to do 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, but that can be done at the same time as 3. And now what you've done is you've broken all of those things down into chunks. And I usually break it down into chunks to the point where you go, oh yeah, they're small enough now I can actually kind of estimate them. You know, and you can say chunk number 4 will take us about 3 days. And then you go, chunk number 2, that feels like twice as big as chunk number 4. So you put in 6 days, and it's as good, you know, until you get really, really good at estimating how long anything will take. That's as good as you're going to get. And then you go, wow, and 2 needs to be done before 4. And what's your name? Yeah, what's it?
Jaime.
Jaime. And Jaime's the only one who knows how to do that. And so you actually can't make 2 and 4 go at the same time. They have to be in sequence because you're resource constrained by specific knowledge. Well, everything I just said, the most common way to show that is in an Excel spreadsheet. But that's very, very manual because now if you win the lottery and leave and you go in there and your estimation is all different, everybody's moving little squares around in Excel. And what they're really doing is synthesizing a chart that looks like this. This is called a Gantt chart. And the length of the bars indicate the length of time. And so time is a x-axis. And so in this, and you can, people hate Gantt charts, but they're very, very useful. From here, you can see that A has to be done before B. Also, A has to be done before E. B goes to C. C has to be done before D, but C also has to be done before F. E has to be done before F. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept, and there are, well, it's simple once you kind of get to that level of understanding. And then it allows you to do a lot of goofy things. If you have a tool like Microsoft Project that does this, now you can actually you can assign resources. You can see where there are resource conflicts. Like if the same person is doing B and E, well, that's not going to work unless you clone them. The other thing that you'll see here is that F can actually be moved up in time. So this is called slack time, and I tell you right now, put slack time in your schedules, and your sponsors won't like it. They go, why do you have slack time in there? Well, because you're going to change your mind, and we're going to need to make up time somewhere. So you leave slack time in there. But also, if you find the path where if you take out all the slack time and you can't compress it anymore, this is known as the critical path. This is the non-compressible path. So that red arrow at the end is the soonest you can possibly make this schedule. You can mess around all you want with E and F, but you're not going to get that thing any sooner. Not unless you fundamentally change what A, B, C, and D do. Okay? I think this is the last of our foundation. Yeah?
I was going to quickly ask, like, the scheduling is always, it's always very, very hard to predict, and it's most often wrong. Is there, like, I was just wondering, because I'm quite early on in my career, it's like, is there, like, a point now that you actually, like, have an intuitive sense and, like, can, like, tell, like, oh, it's going to take, we know it's going to take this long, and we know it's going to take twice as long as what we think, and, like, are you able to, is there at some point where you can actually get, like, an intuitive sense of scheduling, or is this, like, this is impossible?
You get an intuitive sense of scheduling.
Okay.
And I'll show you, when we get to Agile
Yeah.
and Scrum, I'll show you one way that Agile and Scrum have managed to do this. Okay? Other than that, on that last one, on the Gantt chart, like the example I said, if task number 4 takes 3 days, and I challenge anybody to estimate software tasks and then to find a resolution in that, but maybe you can. But you know, you bring it down to the smallest atomic sized task, and you go, yeah, I'm pretty confident I can do that. I'm pretty confident this one is 3 times the size of that. And that's about as good as you get until, and you keep refining throughout your entire career. You start getting better at it. Yes?
In scheduling, have you found that any of the scheduling tools that you work with and your matrix work with actually suck really badly for some reason or another? And any that really surprised you as being amazingly competent to work with, maybe something you hadn't heard of?
Yes and yes. The real quick answer is, the answer to the first one, the really, really good ones, Microsoft Project. And the really, really bad ones, Microsoft Project. Do you know what Jira is? Jira is wonderful if you set it up right and you use the right templates for your task. Jira is also open-ended and you can do anything and you can make a mess of it. Jira is, the success of using Jira, at least last time I used it, which was about 2 years ago, the success of using Jira was cultural based. It was the culture of my team. Once we all agreed on how to use Jira, we were very successful. Same thing with Microsoft Project. Microsoft Project can boil the ocean, attempts to boil the ocean when it comes to project management. There are some things that I used it for very, very successfully, doing a lot of what-if scenarios and understanding dependencies. Very, very successful. Trying to put in, people, assigning people, and looking at how, when they're stacked up too much, when I loaded too much on them, that was harder. But Microsoft Project allows you to do just about anything you would ever want to do, and you'll drive yourself crazy. And that's why people hate it, because it's very, very complex to use. But if you know why you're using it, it was really simple for me to use. That's how I initiated almost every project I had. Understand dependencies, understand the major tasks, stack them up, and kind of ask yourself, that size is about right, or that's gigantic. And then it's the source of conversation from there on out. Risk management. Oops, sorry. Risk management. Risks are things that haven't occurred yet. And risks can be positive or negative because they haven't occurred yet. So they generally have two major characteristics, probability and impact. Engineers tend to talk about probability. So might there be a defect in your code? Yeah, but I only give it 1% probability that there's a defect in my code. But that defect in the code is going to cause your self-lacing shoes to stop self-lacing. I mean, that's pretty catastrophic for the shoe owner, right? So what's the impact? The impact is I got a pair of shoes on that I can't get off because they won't unlace now. That's pretty catastrophic, so I cut them off. So that's the difference between probability and impact. And anybody who studies probability will tell you that most people who state a probability are guessing. It's not data-driven. So probability is a lot of times just wishful thinking. Focus on impact. Make sure that's included. I take that back. Don't focus only on impact. Make sure it's part of the conversation when you talk about risks, though. And plans and responses, contingency plans. If this risk occurs, if this thing occurs, what are you going to do about it? Well, if I'm driving up to Seattle and there's a traffic jam around Fort Lewis or Lewis McChord, which there always is, I have this other route to go around it. But I better decide on that before I hit that turnoff, right? So contingency plans are fine. Having a trigger and monitoring that trigger. If I get to this point and it's already 3:30 in the afternoon and I see the jam in front of us, I'm going to take this now. You can't wait until you're past that turnoff and go, now I'm not going to make it. Well, you don't have enough time. You ran out of the opportunity to execute the contingency. So hard triggers, usually time-bound triggers, that's got to be part of the contingency plan. And that's part that most people will leave out. and as a task to monitor the trigger also. Mitigate, you can mitigate probability, reduce probability. You can also mitigate impact. You can avoid it completely. I'm not even going to go to Seattle this weekend. That's ridiculous. I avoided it. Or you can transfer the responsibility. I could choose to fly, and I transfer the responsibility to get there on time to the airline and not to me driving. There are a lot of ways around it. The business that In Time Tech is in, people will transfer responsibility for training and maintaining a certain level of performance in their in part of their software team by hiring us. It's our problem to train people. It's our problem to go recruit and hire people. It's our problem to maintain this level of value delivery. Ice Climber's Guide to Risk Management. One of my best friends wrote a paper called Ice Climber's Guide to Risk Management. He's an amazing ice climber. Every winter issue of Ice Climbing magazine, he's got a picture in there, and et cetera, et cetera. Ice climbers, the ones that, as Van put it, the ones who are still living, they plot their route while they're still on the ground. They use their judgment and their experience, and they say, I'll be climbing, for 2 hours. I'll be fatigued. This part of this ice will have been exposed by the time I get there to sun for 30 minutes. If I hit soft ice, I will reroute and do this, even though it's going to take me half a more hour. They'll make that decision, and while they are unemotional with their feet still on the ground. When you get up there and you're fatigued after 2 hours and you're 10 feet from the top and you hit soft ice, if you're making a decision then, you're liable to make an emotional decision, non-rational decision, and it could put you in danger. Make your decisions ahead of time. Okay? The art of selective neglect. Prioritize your brain cells. You only have so many. And if you want to generate value, you only have so many to apply. And think of it, this is my model. I don't know how I come up with this. But think of it as a fulcrum, and you can generate a certain amount of value. And if you want to generate more value, you can apply more brain cells. I don't know about you, but I don't have that many more to apply. What's that?
Or you can move the fulcrum.
Or you can move the fulcrum. Nice. If you move the wrong way, well, you're using your brain cells and you're generating just a little bit of value. This is typical of a lot of, I'll pick on software developers since you're all software developers. Software developers, you ever heard the term gold plating? It's when you tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak, but you're adding no value to your product. You're gold plating your product, and it doesn't need to be gold plated. We all do it. Admit it. I've done it. Or you move your fulcrum the other way, generate more value. This is the way you're going to generate more value without having to work 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. That's not fun for anybody. It's fun for a little while. I guarantee it. It's fun for a little while, but it's not fun to, it's not an extensible way to live in Mike world. WATERFALL, the art of trying to be predictable. Old school models. Here we go. I'm going to show you an old school HP model of a waterfall. We used to execute something called the I phase or investigation phase, technical innovation phases, investigations, market investigations, et cetera, manufacturing investigations. How are we going to manufacture this thing? We need to invent new machines. We need to bring a new manufacturing line on, facility online. And then we have something called an I to L checkpoint, investigation to lab phase. We go into the lab phase where we're actually building, manufacturing is building up their machinery, product development's building up, their circuits, and they're mechanical hardware prototypes, and software is coding away. And then once you think you have something that meets all of the criteria, you can move into a QA phase, test the snot out of it, and release it to manufacturing, in which case it goes into the manufacturing phase. Old school, but it has its place. I'll tell you that. When moving forward is expensive. Expensive in a lot of ways. Expensive in risk. Hardware projects tend to have really hard, what they call stage gate decision points. We need to prove this before we release for tooling. Yes, I scrapped $200,000 of tooling in 1 quarter one time because we made a bad stage gate decision. Yeah, that was an uncomfortable conversation to have. So, yeah, waterfall has its place. And a lot of old school people, that's what they know of project management, but software is a game changer. Software is inexpensive, and the old school managers may not get it. So you're gonna have to be tolerant of it, of leading them through. Well, software is all different. I mean, software, I could prototype something today. No, I mean, I can't. You guys can prototype something today that probably does, 80% of what I'm going to ask you to do. If I asked you to turn on Mom's Knitting Club website, you guys, all of you, could probably pound it out in a day, right? And I'm coming along and say, I changed my mind. I don't want a knitting website. I want ice cream tasting club. And you would plow it under or just throw it away. And it's inexpensive. It's relatively inexpensive. And you can do that at any point. And you can change it at any point. And you can actually release it into the cloud and still change it. And the old school managers aren't going to understand this. They will not understand it. So you're just going to have to be gentle with them and bring them along and show them little proof points of what you're talking about. Okay? Yes?
I feel like hardware has gotten a lot. Prototyping specifically for electronics has gotten a lot cheaper and easier recently.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 3D printing has changed hardware prototyping quite a bit. And there are some things that you can't 3D print too, like rockets. SpaceX isn't 3D printing some of their rockets, I can tell you that. But they are doing intense engineering and making sure that before they send a rocket up, that they have really, really, really hard criteria, including simulation and such, for every scenario before they hit those stage gates, before they hit the launch button.
I get the impression that multi-billion-dollar investment in Boston, checking intake and simulation, that it's going to get dramatically better what you can do very soon, in the next 5 years. Game changer.
Yeah.
Small volume printing.
Small volume printing. So yeah, we could. I'd be happy to talk with you about the extensions of 3D printing afterwards. I'll stick around because they are game changing, and there are print technologies out there that you guys probably know. I mean, so I'll stick around and talk about that if you'd like. Agile, the art of learning. Agile is normally look at the Agile manifesto if you've never looked at it, and you get to the genesis of Agile. When people say Agile now, they generally mean iterative processes. And when they talk about Agile in software, they're normally talking about Scrum. There are a lot of others, don't get me wrong. But I didn't make a slide for the others. I'll show you what Scrum looks like. Since it's a variant of Scrum is the most common as far as I've seen out there. So you iterate to learn. That's the primary reason that you iterate. Remember in waterfall, when you have stage gate decisions, sometimes you become paralyzed because you don't have complete information. in Scrum, you start with some general idea, and you start writing code. And then at the end of every, after a period of time, you go, huh, is that good enough? This is the way I would turn on Mom's Knitting Club website. I type up some stuff, I pound out some stuff, and show it to my mom. Say, how's this look? Oh, that looks really good. Can you put a calendar in there so that we know when the next meetings are? Sure. And then you do that. Can you put in a contact list so that we can look up each other's email address and cell phone numbers? Sure. And then you say, how's this look, Mom? She goes, great, turn it on. And you notice every time I did that, there's a period of time, there's some activity, I checked with the end customer, and every time I didn't know whether she was going to say, this is good, turn it on. So at the end of every time, end of every period of time, it was a potentially shippable product. That's what we call a time box. In Scrum, we set time boxes. I just talked to somebody this morning that they run on a 2-week time box. In that 2-week time box, they define the scope for that 2 weeks. They do the development, they do the testing, they actually deploy, and they do a user acceptance test. And at the end of each time box, they say, are we finished? And the answer is normally, no, not yet. And then they say, well, what did we learn? What did we learn in this last time box? Well, let's change things and start a new time box. So that's the emphasis on learning. What did you learn? You learned that Mom wants a calendar. You also learn that these two people don't really have, they have ridiculous ideas when it comes to user interface design, but this person has a strength in it. So let's change up our responsibilities inside of our team. We learn a lot of things. And you go time box, time box, time box, and you keep doing it until at the end of one of your time boxes you go, are we finished? And the answer is yes, and you turn it on. Classic Scrum. But the emphasis on learning is something that a lot of people miss. So the anatomy of a time box, what's inside of a time box? I'm not doing very good on time management, by the way. I'm probably blathering too long, but I'll keep going until somebody pulls the plug on me. Anatomy of a time box. Classic Scrum, what I'm showing here. You go in with a backlog of things that you want to do. And it's rank ordered, and I don't know who rank orders it. There's a role called a product owner that normally rank orders these things. And you estimate them. That in Scrum world you call them story points. Yeah, this one takes 5 story points, that one takes 2, etc., etc. You rank order these things in terms of importance. The team decides, our team has the capacity to do 10 story points. So you look in here and you go, are you sure? Yeah, we can do these 5. They add up to 10 story points. That's the scope for the iteration. You go through this circular thing of develop, test, etc. Come out the other end and you present it to your user. And you go, are we finished yet? And they say, no. Well, let's add some more stuff to the backlog, reorder the backlog according to priority. Let's do it again. You do all that in a time box. Yes, sir?
Do you fan the story points methodology, or do you find that as necessary in this process? I know a number of companies have tried to tweak that in really different ways.
Yeah.
That's a source of a lot.
I do like story points. Is it any different than any other unit of measure for effort? Not for that reason. I like story points because it reminds us that the stories in these backlogs are written that are user-centric. They typically will say, as a user, I want to do this. And it reminds everybody we're working for the user. We're not working for anything else, any other reason. So it's the label story points that I like. Yeah, you could put them in terms of hours. You can put them in terms of whatever. But you bring up a good point. You make it most useful for your organization. There are no hard, fast rules. This is classic Scrum, but I say classic Scrum because I've never seen any team or organization run exactly Scrum the way it is written. You adapt it for your culture and your capabilities of your company. And now I'll show you, again, Mike's personal opinion, the most useful tool in all of Scrum. It's called a burn-up chart. You start with time, story points. Marketing says, hey, let's set the scope. You count up the total story points estimate for the scope. Draw a line. And then you iterate. And you say, wow, we got this many story points done here. We didn't get any more done here. So in this time box, it's still, maybe we got one. But here we got another, another chunk. So this is cumulative story points. After maybe 3 sprints, you can say, we have this type of velocity that we can make with this team. And where you intersect the scope, yeah, that's your estimated finish date. If nothing else changes, that's your estimated finish date. But then some mean guy comes along and says, oh, during this iteration, we actually learned something in the market. Competitor introduced a feature. We need to catch up. We increased the scope. And now you just induce 2 things. You got either a scope gap or a schedule gap. And you say, oh, what do we do? What do we do?
This is a snapshot of fixed resources, right?
Well, are they really fixed? I don't know. Let's go back. Have we had this discussion before? Because I guarantee you it's going to be an emotional discussion now. And what did we do? We had a priority matrix discussion a long time ago. And you go, wow, scope and schedule are two that we consider fixed. Everything else is down less than that. So now what would you do with that? You can say to yourself, okay, we're going to fix the scope and the schedule. That means that we can mess around with the resources, the quality, and the risk. And lo and behold, at this point, you can actually change your velocity by changing your resources, your QA, and your technical and quality risk. You can change your velocity. That's how you use the priority matrix. I kind of hinted at that. You would see it later, didn't I? All right, where are we? SCRUMMERFALL. The art of Agile in the real world. I already hinted at this. There are lots of stuff that are out there in the real world, like the Christmas buying season. You're not going to change that. If you're in a commercial product, that's a hard deadline. You're not going to change it. So I call it iterating in a waterfall exoskeleton. You probably still do your market analysis and some of your, technical investigations, and then your software teams will go, but we want to do Agile. We want to do Scrum. And you go, yeah, go ahead, do Scrum. But it's not going to change the fact that Christmas buying season's out here. So there's no magic there. It's just, and maybe the software teams, they like to do this, and they have their reasons for learning, and there are things that they want to learn that are specific to them, and you let them because it makes sense to them. So there you go. Summary. Showed you some foundational concepts, and again, life according to Mike. The art of selective neglect. The art of attempting to be predictable. Agile. The art of remembering to learn. Remember why you are iterating. And SCRUMMERFALL. Being agile in a real world. That's it. Thank you. Questions abound. So, how did I do on time? Oh my gosh, I'm 50% over. Oh well, I'll learn for next time. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if there's any data that kind of gives you an idea of, how do we put it, things that you could calculate, like how likely something is to happen or how to manage, like, when there's variables, like when you can't meet a deadline, what you can expect? Like, is there a 15% or a 20% thing that you can at least kind of expect? Or is it all as you go?
It depends on the maturity of your team and your organization. So when you get to a certain point and you realize you're not going to make it, when you look at all of the variables, can you reduce scope? You ask marketing if we cut out this feature, which is the one we're having problems with. Marketing will go off and do their marketing thing, and I'm not going to pretend to know what that is, but do their marketing thing and say, you know, facing the competition, facing what we think is going to be there, knowing what we know today, we can expect 10% market loss compared to our projections based on that. You could say, yeah, we could add people, but there's an old adage. It's pretty sexist. I'm not even going to say it. There's an old one though, but you can't just add. You can't double the amount of people and cut the schedule in half. It doesn't work that way.
Well, when you estimate the job, for
Yeah.
example, or when you're in the beginning phases, do you have like a contingency percentage, like 5%, 10 or 15, just to kind of have time to roll around, or do you estimate it as accurately as you can?
Yes and yes. It depends on the maturity of your organization.
Okay.
Sometimes it's 50%, plus or minus 50%. Sometimes it's really, really, really tight. But there was a study done, I'm going to date myself. There was a study done in the early stages of software development back in the 70s, I think, where they took software teams and they said, they took multiple software teams. Half of them they said, or they gave them all the same task. Give us your absolute most accurate schedule. And this one, give us your absolute most aggressive schedule. And the most
realistic schedule.
Yeah, not non-realistic, but if everything went perfectly right, how fast could you possibly do it?
Yeah.
The ones who took a long time and estimated, like they were plus or minus 5%, and the other ones were plus or minus 25%. But the most aggressive ones always came out sooner than the most realistic ones. I think by being very aggressive, you kind of light a fire.
Yeah. Well, you don't think about variables as they arise, like manufacturing defects, anything in the chain of things happening properly.
Right.
And that's life.
I think it's whether the deadlines are acceptable while doing the work is meaningful. So, like when I was in the hospital, it was a deadline based on the American, I can't remember the name of it, but basically Obamacare. It was a regulation, people stayed on weekends, they stayed evenings, they had months on it to make sure everything got done by those dates. Whereas if everything is this very specific date, and people scratch their head by that date, because senior management said so, and so on, and you only get 5%, and you get used to that. After a while, deadlines become
But the one thing, if the intermediate checkpoints, though, whether they be formal or informal, but every week, every 2 weeks, it depends on your project, you should check in and say, are we on track? Are we on track? Because, cumulatively, if you're 5% longer over the course of 6 months, you'll be off by a month. Well, nobody wants to know that at the end of 6 months. If you're, after 2 weeks, if you go, yeah, we're 5% hot, you let your team know that. You let your sponsors know that. You let your management know that. And you go, okay, is this a consistent trend? Yeah, we've been seeing it. Let's make some changes then. Yeah, you owe early visibility when you're off plan. Me personally, you don't owe me working on weekends and 12 hours a day. So.
I would also have the technical competence of the project manager for a huge number of projects. You don't need an expert in C++, whatever, to be a project manager. But for some, when you're sitting there making estimates to the guy, that guy just came on a senior engineering position at Microsoft.
Yeah.
Often those estimates are a lot more accurate because there's a give and take there. It's like, what take do you think? This is why. That's fine.
Yes.
How do you transition into project management, or what are the different ways you could say, like, I can do a video project with my buddies this weekend and say I was the project manager, and how applicable do you think it is switching fields and saying I was a project manager for this can I switch to a really different field, project manager? Is it probably based on how technical it is?
2 questions.
How do you move in?
How do you move in? You move in by just starting to do it. You move in by paying attention to what the project manager is doing, and you say, "Huh, show me how you're doing that." And this is how Mike got to it. Show me what you're doing. How did you come up with that? Can I help you with that? Yeah, that estimate. Can I be tracking our velocity for us? I'd like to be doing that, and you just start doing the job. That's the easiest way to get any job, is just start doing it if possible. The other way to do it is go get some formal training, some certification, because to get that certification, they'll make sure that you know how to do it, and it'll open doors for you. One of my good friends that I made this year, she has a PhD in literature. She was teaching faculty, a full tenured teaching faculty, and just decided, I don't want to do this anymore. She got PMP certified, and now she's a Scrum Master for a big insurance company in software. Now, what was the second part? Because I had a great answer. Oh, I know.
Yeah, but
You asked about, can you be, yeah, go ahead.
transitioning from one field to another as a project manager. You said, I have these project managing skills. I don't know your technical field that well, but I'm a project manager and manage things. How well have you seen the transition?
So I was at HP later in my career, and I'd been doing computer engineering, architecture, and then I was managing software. I managed software for 5 years, 6 years, and then they said, "Mike, we want you to manage user experience design." They gave me two guys with PhDs in cognitive psychology, and they don't even speak English. I mean, I didn't know what they're talking about. I said, "I don't know anything about user experience design. I kind of know that touch me colors inside of a printer are green." And they go, no, they're blue, Mike, really. But anyway, and they said, "Well, Mike, you're a really good manager, and besides that, you won't tell them what to do, because people with PhDs in cognitive psychology don't like to be told what to do." So they said, you have the skills and you have the open mind, and you can apply those skills to this new discipline area, and you won't bring in your prejudices with you. And so for that reason, they wanted me in there. Well, it ends up that user experience in a big printer is physical user experience, is the industrial designers who manifest the experience. So they gave me them. And then you go try to find your industrial designers, and you can never find them because they're talking to the plastics engineers. And so so they gave me the plastics engineers. And the plastics engineers are always talking to the guys designing the sheet metal that's underneath that hold the plastics up. And so now I know a lot about sheet metal. I know why you don't add bromine to a polycarbonate blend piece of plastic, and I know what a 7-point Likert scale is in user experience design, and how to do a contextual inquiry. So I learned an awful lot, but I never told them what to do. They told me what to do quite often. But it was a blast. It was so much fun. Okay, what else?
I would add one thing to that.
Yeah.
That face value of American investment. During down economy, almost impossible. Because even if it's internal, there's 100 people lined up with 20 years experience for every job. So if it's something you want to do, it's going great.
Yeah, go do it. And if I have my choice right now, I think I'd go be a line producer for my daughter's stop motion animation company. That would be a blast. So, yes.
You didn't mention Scrum Master certification, you mentioned PMP.
Yes.
I was going to suggest more in common that Scrum Master certification is probably less taxing to get. But I actually did that, but doing PMP is quite less for a long time. What's your experience?
I am not a certified Scrum Master, so I can't say.
It's really asking you about starting on project management and something that is, it's I don't say it's cheaper, but it's certainly less time.
But certified Scrum Master, Probably, I'd say there are, well, I don't know. I could just guess. There goes the subwoofer. Don't worry. Low frequency sound is omnidirectional, so it can be on the map. Yeah, I'm not a certified Scrum Master. I do know that PMP was so arduous that I'll maintain it rather than have to go take that exam again. So.
You wouldn't be able to read the font.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
They redid the version, and the font size is so small.
Is it really? It's age discrimination. They don't even know it. They're trying to filter us out in their own way. Yes.
So with Intent Tech, when you let's say you have a client and they have sort of their own word stack, do you have like your own stack internally of like this is what we're going to build for all of our clients, or do you have people of area expertise somehow to adapt to whatever the client has? I was looking at the website and it seemed like from the website it's like we do everything.
Yeah. We'll do everything for our clients. We won't dictate unless they want us to. Have we done everything? No. I ran into a client just the other day that they wanted a very, very specific skill set. We didn't have it. But we could sit down with our chief technologist and say, this is what they're asking for. And he was able to say, that was a derivative of this, and it's adjacent to this. And we do those two things. If we get the right person, they'll be easy, who have experience in these two things, they'll easily bridge into this specific technology, which he interviewed, he got the job, and it's going to work out just fine. Do we bring our own stack in? No, we work for our clients. However, we do make our own products that we license in certain areas. Those stacks belong to us. Do we replicate the stacks of our clients? It depends on what our client wants. We have clients who want everything tight inside of their own firewall, and they just want us to come in and help them inside their environment, and that's fine. We have other clients who say, we can't ship you a chunk of hardware over to India, but here's the entire software stack. Go do that and write a bunch of simulators around it, and then those programmers are off and running.
Another quick question.
Yeah.
So when you oftentimes you outsource things, one thing that usually often gets lost is communication, like technical documentation internally. Like oftentimes, like the commit messages are very poor. There's no personal ownership of the task, because they don't have personal ownership. It's consulting. Is there like any way that you like keep up, like or if maybe it's not necessary to necessarily keep this up, but if you're like working with also an in-house team, like keeping up documentation and keeping up like commit messages, even on like the developers in India, like having like some sort of consistent quality of commit messages with consistent quality, keeping documentation, if they adding proper documentation when it should be added, you're not adding too much because then it becomes readable.
I haven't read our company's code,
Okay.
but I can tell you this, that we adapt to the client's norms, and I can tell you right now, the clients that I'm managing right now, our internal processes exceed the rigor of our clients.
Okay.
We document more than our client's internal staff does, and our clients have told us that the state of the code and of our code exceeds our programming practices exceed those of their internal team. And in fact, we have somebody starting on Monday who's there specifically to teach the client, to lead the client team in programming practices in specific areas. So, and this comes from to tell you the truth, this comes from our company culture and our founders. Our founders they were very good technologists, exceedingly good managers, and they take it very, very personally how our company is perceived by our clients and by the industry. And so, but that's very, very specific to our company that you asked about our company. So, yeah, and the programmers that I have gotten to know, they're exceedingly good. They're better than I was. And
I'm just thinking about it because I've worked with, like I worked in a consulting organization in Eastern Europe, and I worked twice, worked in one, and there's definitely like communication issues, and even internally, like there wasn't any thought to like document it because it's like a small company, everyone knows each other, it was nepotism, friends, family, so nothing really, everything's sort of left like in that they know each other rather than in documentation. Like, sort of the common practice.
I'll tell you this, so this is very specific to my company. We do have an English linguist that we hired to help with the English language communications. He spends half of his time in India and half of his time here. And even the half of the time that he spends here, he spends on video chat, teaching English classes. Well, English is known as a language. The colloquialisms and the norms of conversation in U.S. English are different, and that's what he teaches. There's something else I was going to say, I can't remember what it was, but it's along those lines. Yeah, yes, our Indian engineers have accents. Yes, it bothered me when I first started, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I understand that.
I wasn't referring to like difference in linguistics. It's just the practice of this company I was working for was even their own internal processes that you have to do would be like lost somewhere in Slack. They never had any rigor to document things in any formal way. Is that Slack's messages that are lost. So if you join new there, then ask these same questions over again and somebody exists.
I would say our processes for communication are more rigorous because everything that we do belongs to the client. We need to be able to turn it over. So all the code, all the communications, everything, we pay attention to that stuff. What else? Yes?
It seems like you have a really healthy work culture, but I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about people management, if you've ever had any experiences handling like internal conflicts, because I mean the people resources that if people aren't getting along or aren't on the same page, I'm sure that can affect that communication or lack of scope and all of the other factors. How would you handle that? Are there any like preventative strategies like team building? Like if somebody is entering onto your team, how do you know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, there are a lot of soft skills that come with people management. The key, in my experience, is empathy, and one of the keys. So I've learned this over this school, over my career in the School of Hard Knocks, but this is emphasized in my company also. I've come to the belief that if you understand a person, you can understand why they're doing certain things. If you project what you would be doing, that's open for misunderstanding. Something as simple as when I drive down the road now, and this was just tough. This isn't something that I just decided to do yesterday. It's taken me a lifetime to develop, but when somebody cuts me off in traffic now, I'm not going to say I do this all the time, but I do this at least 75% of the time. I tell myself they're probably worried about their kid and they went out to get medicine for their kid who's sick at home. I choose to believe that. Whenever there's conflict, I choose to believe that. If there's somebody that's on my team, I sit down and I get to know them. I can't remember who said it, maybe Abraham Lincoln, somebody like that said, I don't like that person, therefore I'm going to get to know them better. And I try to do that, and I try to get teammates to do that.
I'm wondering how you instill that. How do you get your team to be friends with each other without forcing it?
They don't need to be friends with each other. They just
But
need to work
work well
together.
together.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any magic formula. I usually run off to HR. They have those types of tools. They're trained to do that. I stumble around.
I think instilling mutual respect is
Yeah.
one of the keys. Right? Because there's normally it's one party not respecting the other.
And I hate to say this, but in the real world, a lot of professional managers at higher levels aren't necessarily big fans of everyone being blood brothers that love each other terribly, because we all know stories of, I remember the Tektronix division, where almost all the A players got up and left the Cascade. Overnight, all their top players in the F something division, it happens in small levels, company after company after company, in good economy, and when they're all buddies with each other, like it's almost impossible to hire Oracle ERP experts. These are the guys that manage the financial apps that run the entire company, as big as it can be, Fortune 500 company, and they often form these tight bonds together. I work for a company where they fired all those guys. Well, some other company in India said they could replace them. We're like, wow, we all knew it wouldn't work. It didn't. And all of a sudden they had to hire someone, and nobody would come aboard. They're like, fired. Your team was together for 15 years, and that's unfortunately executive managers sometimes they're not necessarily one of their goals, because if everybody really loves each other, when one guy goes off to another company, you know, the Netscape story, and how that team would go over and over again in these stories, and all of a sudden you got nobody, and you got no history. That happens a lot.
Right.
So,
I presented that question in a polarized way. It's more like not being friends, but like at least being able to communicate professionally and not yell at each other. Or I had a really traumatic work experience. That's where this is coming from. I'm just like, I don't want to be the manager that I had.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the nonviolent communication framework?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I've used it on teams that I've trained, and it's NVC or nonviolent communication. But anyway, I think it sort of promotes a lot of the values that you were discussing. I was curious about that as well, what you were saying about the onboard. Like, do you onboard, like, you may not be in touch with onboarding all the time, but, you know, you've learned all this stuff. Not everybody else has.
Yes. I've relied on HR to give me guidance quite a bit. There are things that you can do for team building. There are a lot of resources online. But it's funny that you should mention that. So, getting back to In-Time Tech, yes. I've been there about a year and a half, and we're on like the 5th book. I mean, I'm in 2 reading groups. And one that I've been in consistently, we're on 5th book in a year and a half, and we read it together. We're reading Nonviolent Communications right now. This is the type of book that we read. Probably the most impactful book that I've read is called The Saint, the Surfer, and the CEO. It's a cool book. And if you aspire to leadership, Leadership is an Art by Max Dupree. I almost cry every time I read it. It's a magnificent book. My personal opinion. Leadership is an Art. Max Dupree, D-E-P-R-E-E. Max Dupree was the president of Herman Miller Furniture. And to give you a flavor for the book, he starts with a story about his grandfather who founded the company. One of the key employees passes away, and this is back at a time where his grandfather went to spend time with the widow. And the widow says, and the guy's position was he was the millwright. I won't bother you with what a millwright does, but anyway. And as they're having this uncomfortable spending time with the widow, she says, "Can I read you some poetry?" And of course, he says yes. And his grandfather nearly cries. The poetry is so beautiful. And he says, "Who wrote that?" And she says, "Oh, that's my husband." And so he poses the question: does a company have an obligation to find the true gifts that people have? Was this a poet who happened to be a millwright? Was this a millwright who happened to be a poet? And why didn't they know about it? Why didn't they celebrate this person's gifts? So that's the tone of that book. So a lot on servant leadership and true leadership of people as opposed to management of projects. Since you guys asked, I'll keep rolling on this one. But probably one of the most impactful things that ever happened. My second year at HP, my direct manager got promoted, and all of a sudden now he was managing an organization of 120 people instead of a group of 10. And I went in one evening, and here was Jack on his hands and knees. He had taped together a bunch of butcher paper, and about the size of the number of chairs here was a big heart. And he had a stack of HR files, and he was reading each one and writing. I saw him, and I said, Jack, what are you doing? He says, tomorrow's Valentine's Day, and my first day on this new job. I'm trying to get to know everybody and write them a big Valentine's. And he hung this from the ceiling, and it was a personal note to every single one of those 120 people. And he said, Mike, always remember you lead people, but you manage projects. That stuck with me. I saw Jack about 3 years ago. I was driving across country, he stopped, and I told him that, and he says, Mike, I don't remember that. He says, yeah, he actually cried. He says, but to think that something that I could say stuck with you all these years, and something that meaningful. Yeah, that was really special. Anyway, yes?
No, what
Excuse me, Mike, I have to leave. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope that was useful.
Yes.
getting back to, because I work with various crews that come in and out. I work in ad production.
Mhm.
So essentially, like when I get a brand new crew to create, again, the hierarchies are kind of all over the place. Somebody always wants to be in charge. Someone's got a little bit of an antisocial attitude. I like to start the day with coffee circle, and everybody says what the most important thing that motivates them every day is. And whether it's your dog or your favorite food, it creates something that's not necessarily like some fundamental life thing, but like, what do you love? What was good about your day? And it starts it off in a really positive, relatable way. And you know, you end up with two guys that would be competing all day going, dude, look at my dog. And they're cool with each other, and then they don't fight. It just sets a little bit less stress and like who's gonna be, you know, the big badass on set that day, and it makes everybody relatable without being too personal. So they don't need to be best friends, but let's find a common ground. Food is usually one of them. Food and coffee. Yeah. Food, coffee, pets, safe topics. But you know, like when people talk about like how to approach a person to flirt, you go with very moderate topics, weather, environment, things like that. You don't go too deep, but you don't go too impersonal. Would that, make sense?
Yeah. On the kick it off level, yes. At some point, everybody has to be responsible for their own behaviors, and how to instill that responsibility and get on the same page. I'll go back since I bothered telling you guys I was a volleyball coach. Yeah, I had two players, one of which they just hated each other. Once they found out how integral they were to the team to work together, because there were only 6 people out there and on the court at the same time, and they all had a role, and all of that helped a little bit, but it didn't help as much as having an overnighter and having them just get to know each other, get to know that, I didn't know you liked that band, and I didn't know this, and one of them was just going through a hard time with the illness in the family, and that completely changed after that weekend. They have to, at some point, it needs to come from inside.
Companies create group lunches where there can be no links, everybody's invited out together.
Yeah.
On a very regular basis, the best boss I ever had, her name was Karen Johnson. She was beloved. The company with 7,500 employees. She was just the COO, just like the CFO. Everybody loved her, trusted, and she was very realistic though. Many years experience. She said, the first thing I try to figure out, there's a big thing going on, figure out is that person redeemable at all? Because sometimes people you just have to plan on letting you go, but you give them that chance, make it very clear to everybody is given that chance. And usually HR has a specific policy that people want to doing. And she said she never mentions in HR, she never mentions you might be let go or so on and so forth. But she just immediately gets into that mood, and she says that she needed to, so I saw this happen with somebody in another department that decided to work out with me that level. And she said, the most important thing is to do your own research as a manager, because all kinds of stories from people, by the time you're done, 3/4 of them are BS. And you have to do that before maybe production is called. So sometimes everybody hanging out together and doing lunch together just doesn't work. I can think of solid 8 to 10 times it was just somebody that everybody knew was the actual source of the issue. They weren't willing to change, too loud and obnoxious, they were mean to the coworkers at HP up in the Murdoch thing. There was one lady on the line, everybody was like hating each other. You think there was one lady on the line that was causing issues.
Yeah. I had one player this season. I got halfway through the season. I didn't know what was wrong, and
Just
Yeah.
throws off everything.
she we finally transferred to another team within the club. 4 players. So of the 11 players remaining, 4 of them came after practice and said, "Thank you." You know, that was the source of. Nobody wanted to say anything. Everybody was trying to be nice. Everybody was trying to work hard. She was a source of a lot of tension. Nobody told me specifically anything she said, but it was just. And then the season went like this. Yeah, sometimes you're just going to run into that.
Just like you're asking me questions.
People are different.
Some people are difficult. Yeah, and a couple times I've just had to say, "What do you want? You know, what do you want out of life? Because you're not getting it here, and being unhappy is just a lousy way to spend time." So,
We tell an extreme story. So I worked at a consulting company where, and this unfortunately this happens with the programming, one guy over a weekend went into other people's code, anybody's permission, and made all kinds of fixes. The truth is, he improved everything everywhere. He was, you hear about the 100-time engineer, he was in everything. So the company all of a sudden had to deal with like 11 people being very, very angry and saying that they might quit. A lot of companies would just fire that guy. That guy was one of the key reasons why Intel was keeping 55 of our guys going, right? So the way they handled that, it actually fairly easy. And I was apparently seen as the mitigator, I was younger, the sort of like to talk to him and say, blah, 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 and somehow it all worked out. But there are extreme situations where all of a sudden you can't just fire the guy, no matter how badly you want to, and it still worked out. They kind of separated them from him to me, and eventually he has to be a really terrible, terrible person that really has to get the
yeah, that's another good point. You got a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. You got to figure out is there a square hole that they would fit better into, or can you make one and still achieve what you need to achieve as a team? What else? Okay.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you know any third-party products that? There's a million charting programs out there. Chart out in the sky to forever. But do you know of any charting programs that are really dedicated to the project management world, but not instructions that really nail it? That you actually use guys you work and have experience with?
No. That doesn't mean they don't exist. You just asked who I know of. No, I don't. Anything else? Thank you, everyone, for coming in.
Thank you.